We're now in Matthew chapter 5, and this is the place where we find what is commonly known as the Beatitudes. Those are teachings of Jesus that have really become world famous. Even outside Christianity, have attracted a lot of attention. Mahatma Gandhi, for example, um, really was in favor of those. Friedrich Nietzsche, on the other hand, pretty much hated what Jesus had to say here. And one of the interesting things is, despite all the attention that the Beatitudes have gotten, there is still a lot of misunderstanding as to what they really mean. Now let's have a look at those in a moment. But first, let's quickly look at the structure here. So remember in chapter 4 in Matthew, at the end we had a little summary of saying that Jesus in his ministry did basically three things. He was teaching, preaching, and healing, and the Beatitudes are an example of his teaching ministry. So after that little summary, we now get to know in detail what Jesus was teaching. So it says, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountain, and his disciples came to him, and he began to speak, and he taught them. And he was saying, and then he gives them 8 things here from verse 3 all the way to verse 10, 8 different statements that begin with blessed are. The Greek version here is makarios, and the Latin is beatudo, and that's where we get the word beatitudes from. And beatudo really means not so much that somebody is blessed, but really more of a personal you are blessed. And what that means is what we're going to see in a second. So what Jesus is saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, the meek, the ones that hunger and thirst for righteousness, the ones who are merciful, the ones that are pure at heart, the peacemakers, and the ones that are persecuted for righteousness' sake. That's what he's saying, because there were a lot of people being persecuted for all the right reasons. So he's just excluding that and saying, blessed are those who are persecuted, even though they should not be persecuted. And then he's making them a promise on each of the statements. Blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, because they will be comforted, and so on. And then verses 11 and 12 are a bit of a commentary on what that means. And he said, almost like a summary, blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. And then why is that? He says, your reward will be great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So in other words, you can share in that tremendous ministry that some of the greatest prophets of all times have shared, and that is the unfortunate thing, that as they proclaim the word of God, they make more enemies than friends. And but he says, remember the greatness of some of the prophets of old, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and so on. And he says you will be in line with them if all of that applies to you here. Now, let's have a look. Like I said, the Beatitudes have been vastly misunderstood, because most people, when they read it, what they think the Beatitudes are saying is that if you want to be blessed, you have to be a certain way. And so what we want to say here first is what the Beatitudes are not. And that was just an example of what they're not. The Beatitudes are not a list of people whom God blesses, like a random list, and if you want to be blessed, you have to be that way. They are also not good advice. A lot of people read them and they think, this is Jesus giving me advice on how to live my life, and he says I should do or become like those people, so that in order so then I will get certain other things. So that's again what they're not. They're not the people whom God blesses. They're not good advice. They're not vague sort of promises for the future. And they are not a moral code of some sort. It's not that suddenly we all have to become like that in order to be blessed. So what are they then, if that's what they're not? Well, and again, like I hinted in the beginning, the clue lies in that word blessed, and a better translation of makarios, and certainly a better translation of beatudo, is to say, you are blessed if you are poor in spirit. You are blessed if you mourn. You could say, great news to you if you are poor in spirit. Great news to you if you mourn. Great news to you if you are meek. So Jesus is taking attitudes that usually people would look down on and say, those people, those who mourn are obviously not the blessed ones. But he's turning that upside down and he says, great news to you if you mourn. So the Beatitudes are not so much advice as they are great news. And remember, this is something that Matthew has started already to develop. That is that upside down kingdom, that when Jesus' kingdom comes, or when he announces the kingdom, it is the other way around, the other way around from what people usually would think it is. So he is again announcing great news, and he is announcing the kingdom. Great news to you if you hunger and thirst for righteousness. Great news to you if you are pure at heart, and so on and so forth. So that is the proper way of understanding the Beatitudes. It is Jesus proclaiming good news into the lives of those who have to deal with all sorts of hardship. And he's saying, great news. There is a promise, you will inherit the kingdom of heaven, you will be comforted, and so on. And then lastly, let's just look at one more aspect that's often overlooked. When somebody is blessed is in the Old Testament as in the New Testament, the point is, yes, that person will receive something nice from God, but also there is almost an obligation, or there is an element of being blessed by God to pass on that blessing. Now, how does it work in this context here? When Jesus says to you, great news for you who are poor in spirit, because yours is going to be the kingdom of heaven, he is, in other words, saying to you, when the kingdom of heaven comes, it will come through those who are poor in spirit. So you see that it is on the one hand the blessing that God will give you if you are in a terrible condition, but also saying those who are poor in spirit, those who mourn, those whom Nietzsche said, those are the people that have a slave attitude almost. Yeah, those are the people, Jesus said, through whom my kingdom will come. And that is, of course, a great contrast between what usually people think power should be like and what Jesus says power will be like in his kingdom. So usually we think the kingdom will come through the powerful, the kingdom will come through the proud, the kingdom will come through those who have themselves together, the people will come through those who are go-getters, the kingdom will come through those who achieve things, the kingdom will come through those who make things happen, and so on and so forth. But Jesus is turning it around and he's saying, my kingdom will come not through power, not through tanks that anyone sends into other countries. My kingdom is not going to come through force or power. My kingdom is going to come through the poor in spirit, through those who mourn, through those who are meek, through those who are poor at heart. So he's proclaiming great news to those who are in that condition, and he's making that tremendous promise that his kingdom will come precisely through those kind of people.